So while we're bringing this up, this is a great segue because Krim's point there is right that these allegedly status-inducing increasing metals didn't do very much. For a variety of reasons, I kind of buy that. Now, you may have remembered from his first graph, there was a fertility increase in Mongolia in the last 15 years. Mongolia did do something. They massively increased their child subsidies in that time frame. So cash might work. Okay, but I work for the Institute for Family Studies. We're a nonprofit that does research on family. That's what the name suggests. And I had the pronatalism initiative. A lot of my job is on policy. It's telling policymakers, elected officials, what they should do with taxes and welfare and spending and how they can get 0.07 more babies per woman, and that's super important. And everybody's like, cool, 0.07 more babies per woman. That's like not much. And the result of this is we end up spending a lot of money on policies that have modest effects, debated effects also, that there's some debate about if these effects are real in some contexts. And also, I end up getting these emails, particularly from like pastors, grandparents, jilted lovers, who are like, hey, how can I really like what you all are doing on marriage and babies. Like, how do I get my people to do that? How do we get my congregants to make babies? Or my wife to be like, yes, let's have another. And I'm always like, well, look, we mostly do policy, not like bullying your friends. But I figured, you know what, I get enough emails, we should bully our friends. So the motive for this presentation, this is a new project we're starting at IFS on how non-state actors can motivate social change. And the reason I want to do this is because our view is that policy changes on their own only do a little bit for fertility, but they're a crowbar. Okay? You've got a sharp edge on a crowbar, you stick it in a crack, and then you lever it. So we think policy is the crowbar. It's the thing that it gets you the first little bit. So where does the weight on the crowbar come from? You. It comes from cultural actors with pronatal values. So this is the case of Quebec. Quebec did a baby bonus, a lump sum payment right at birth in the late 80s. And if you compare Quebec to Ontario, there's a large increase in births. Then they repealed it in 1997, because Quebec, and fertility fell. We have a similar case in Australia, same effect sizes, same policy, same everything. Baby bonuses create a modest increase in fertility. Cool, great to know. But like, look at this. We go from like 1.4 to 1.6. Like, yay, slightly slower death. I mean, yeah, great. I would also like slower decline, but I'd prefer to do even better. So I have a paper we just published last month looking at the case of Georgia. Now, if you've been around pronatalism for a long time, you know that Georgia, country, not state, the state should rename itself, the country has priority. So that you know what I'm going to say. In 2007, Patriarch Ilya II of the Georgian Orthodox Church was a little mad that their brand spanking new cathedral that they leveled a mountain to build did not have enough baptisms happening. Also, that these Georgians, who are all like 85% members of his church, were aborting a bunch of babies. And that's not good because abortion bad. And he said, we should do something about this. So this dark blue line is Georgian fertility, the total fertility rate. But I want to start with some other countries here. This green one is nine provinces in northeastern Turkey, their fertility rates. So you can see they fell over time. In Turkey, Erdogan, he didn't really actually do any big pronatal policy. He just likes to talk about it. So there's a decline over time. Okay. Then we have the purple. That's Armenia. You can see they got real low, and then they kind of came up. And then here in 2017, they did do a big pronatal cash policy. You can see fertility rose a bit. Okay. But they're still not very high. Then you can see this like dark brownish one. That's 9 Russian federal subjects in the North Caucasus. You can see that there's this bump up right here. That's because in 2006, the Russians threw a bunch of money at babies. You can see that money for babies is a thing I'm for. Then this blue bar is in 2013 and 14, Georgia threw a bunch of money at babies, and you can see nothing happened and fertility declined. Okay, but this gray section, this is when Patriarch Ilya II said there's not enough baptisms in my cool cathedral. I will baptize any third-born or higher child born to a married Georgian Orthodox couple. And all the economists said, amen. We have treatment groups. Okay, so married Georgian Orthodox, third or higher parity. What happened? Here's what happened. This is from, we also did a synthetic control study, but I didn't want to show the graph from it. But we also did difference in difference, which is where we compare these different treatment groups within country, because we have data on women's fertility history by religion and their marital histories. So what we can see is this is the annual probability of births on different margins. So the first one is just the odds you have a child. And this is basically the treatment effect among Georgian Orthodox women converted into an absolute rate. So they go from 4.5% odds of having a child in a given year to like 8.1%. That's a big effect. And I can tell you, if I were showing you the cool asterisks that are on regression tables, there's like 6 of them. The having another child in marriage, because remember, it's actually an intervention on marriage, right, goes up by a similar absolute amount. If you look at the third birth rate, it doubles, okay? And if you look at the third birth rate in marriage, it's also basically doubling. And if I just flip back here, that's what happened. 18 months fertility goes from 1.6 to 2.3. Just like that. We also have monthly data. We can see it begins 7 months after the announcement, which also happens to be when Russia invaded them. So we know it wasn't because of good vibes. Actually, fertility declined after Russia invaded them. Same thing's happening in Ukraine. Same thing happened in Chechnya. Same thing happened in Transnistria. War with Russia is bad for babies. Okay, so Georgia's not the only place where we know these things happen. We have prior studies that show that when the Pope visits your town, what happens to baby making? Goes down, goes up? Well, it depends on what he says. They rise about 20% if he mentions babies. We have a very cool study that actually goes through the language of papal speeches. And if he's like, the Lord would like you to prevent climate change, nothing happens. But if he's like, babies, have them, people are like, yes, sir. Likewise, if he mentions abortion, abortions go down. So it turns out religious actors in particular have influence. When they say things, their congregants respond. Now, full disclosure, I am aware of a Catholic group in India, the Malankara Church, that attempted the third baby baptism spiel. They don't have good data. They don't really know if it worked or it didn't, but their vibe is it didn't work. Which is to say, it's not a mechanism, okay? It's about the specific charisma, influence, status, and power of the social actors, okay? So like Kanye could be way more influential 10 years ago than he can now, okay? You got to use your power when you have it. Now, that's religion. Let's go ahead. God exists. Raise your hand. Okay, not every hand is up. The rest of you are like, well, I guess my view is going to die in the future. Okay, so let's talk about non-religious influences. This is from a study of 18,000 Dutch people. And my colors are funky, aren't they? So the blue lines are pointing to the estimate. This is from like a social graph type study. The blue lines are pointing to the effect of having social connections who have various like child-wanting attitudes, and its effects on your view of if children are likely for you and its effects on your ideal number of children. Both of these we know are behaviorally predictive of your actual fertility in subsequent years. You can see if you have friends who like babies, you're more likely to like babies. This is not just, by the way, sorting and selection. They did do some mechanisms to try and figure out like when people move away and stuff like that. So all your antenatal friends need to be deported. Sorry, for those listening, it's a joke. Then the red lines are social ties to people who do not want kids. They are negative. Okay. Dutch people like to study these things, so here's all Dutch women. And instead what we're doing here is, first we're looking at the effect of a colleague who becomes a parent. What happens when your coworkers have a baby? You have babies. It's contagious, okay? Now, when your coworker does it, you're like, well, that might be some kind of like sorting or selection, or maybe coworkers tend to be very similar. What about when your coworker's sibling has a baby? Okay? No effect right away, but eventually the word reaches you that people are having babies now, and you have a baby. There's debate about exactly how to interpret this. The most plausible channel is what's called a social learning effect. That is, it's not that like just the ghost of pronatalism entered the chat. Okay? Hi, I'm the editor for Pronatalism Magazine. Thank you for adding me to your signal group. No, that's not what's going on. What's going on is when people observe near peers or people of admirable status demonstrating the feasibility, joy, pleasantness, whatever you want to call it, of having kids, people who don't yet have kids realize that they can do it too. Best way to make someone have a baby is to hold a baby. Best predictor of people in longitudinal data, the best predictor of people revising their desired family size upwards is, anybody know? No, you having a baby. If you have a baby, you will revise your desired family size up. Demographers are so familiar with this, we've come up with a name for it called rationalization bias, which tells you demographers' opinions of people's ability to know their own preferences, that they think it couldn't possibly be that people just learned they liked babies more than they thought. They must be rationalizing. Okay, it's most likely social learning. We can also look at peers. This is from the Ad Health Survey in the US. We can see that peers that you're not friends with, their babies don't have an effect on your odds of having a baby. Peers you are friends with do. Okay? When people you like make people you might like in the future, you also think you'll make people you might like in the future. Usually you like your kids. This is from Norway. It's just looking at neighbors. Now, of course, what neighborhood you pick, maybe you pick it because you want to live around lots of small children. That didn't say the way I meant it. I didn't practice that line. There could be residential sorting, so I'm not going to say this is entirely causal, but basically, the more people with 3 or more kids that live around you, the more likely you are to have a third kid. Peers matter. Also, family matters. So you might wonder, what happens when you change retirement ages, right? My mother recently retired. She spends a lot of time with my kids. It's awesome. My wife and I, for our 10th anniversary, we went out to visit a friend in Utah. My mom took our kids. She watched them for like 3 nights. They had a great time. They came back wishing we could return them to Grandma's farm because it's more fun than our house. So grandparents are an important part of the childbearing process because they do a lot of help and support. But of course, they're able to do that more when they retire. So what happens when you muck around with retirement ages? When grandma's retirement is accelerated, that is the age when she's in a cohort that gets a younger age at retirement, her daughter has more babies. Okay, there's not a son effect, it looks like, in this particular study. There are in some other studies, but this one had the best inference, so I went with this, even though the effect size are a bit smaller than I prefer from other studies, but it's more credible. Grandpas kind of matter, but dudes aren't as good at changing diapers, I guess, or just haven't learned it. So the point is, the availability of kin support, of other support, really does matter, okay? I can also show you that the most antenatal geographic arrangement with your family is to live in the same house as your parents. That's not surprising. It's really bad for the Riz. But that line taken from Dan Hess. But the most pronatal geographic arrangement is to live within 5 minutes of your parents. Okay? And we all know, like, as soon as you say this, people are like, well, yeah, duh. Okay, now, we started with religion, so let's return to religion via something called alloparenting. If I can teach you one bit of vocabulary for the weekend, you should learn alloparenting. Allo means other, parent means parent. What this means is other people standing in the place of parent. It means free childcare, okay? But not taxpayer paid free childcare. Free childcare, okay? So, why do religious people have more babies? Is it because they just deeply believe in transcendence? Some people, yes. If you're having 6 kids, it's because you believe in transcendent communities. But that's not most religious people. The reality is fertility differentials by religion they're not nothing, but they're not. It's not like religious people in America have like 3 times as many kids as secular people, okay? What actually explains the difference? Alloparenting. Religious people get free childcare from their co-religionists. Also, they get more from their families. Why? Because religion is family glue. Once you account for alloparental differences, so this is this completed fertility and alloparental support by religiosity. This is a sample constructed from about 16,000 reproductive age women that I've surveyed in the last couple of years. You can see religious people who attend monthly or more have more babies. No one's shocked. What you can also see is they get, across ages, they get way more free childcare. Like, it's not like, oh, you also get Sunday school Sunday morning. No, like, you're never attending people on average get about 4 like person days of support on childcare in a given week. Whereas your monthly or more people, like 4 or 5, your monthly or more people are getting somewhere between 7 and 11. That is, they're getting twice as much free support from family, friends, all that. It's no surprise they have more babies. Okay? Like, that's just how it works. When your community invests in your kids, you make more kids. So, alloparenting matters. So what's the upshot of this? You can be an alloparent. You can change other people's fertility. We don't know exactly why the Georgian Orthodox Patriarch's intervention boosted fertility, but we can rule out some things. We know that unintended fertility in that case didn't rise because we have data on it, okay? It's not that people were like, well, I guess I'll just have more whoopsie babies. No, actually, it was driven by intended fertility. We know that desired family size did not change because we have surveys on that. People weren't like, well, now I want 3 kids. People just got more able to complete their fertility. We don't, unfortunately, in the Georgian case, have data on alloparenting. But I was there a couple of years ago. Just visually watching how these people are socializing, they're definitely doing a lot of alloparenting. And my wonder is, did having the most popular single celebrity in the entire country, a man who's the living embodiment of your national identity, come out and say, good Georgians have 3 babies, did it make grandma do more childcare? Because she's a good Georgian. Maybe, I don't know. We can influence fertility by exhorting and speaking well of family life. People are like, speak softly and carry a big stick. And I'm like, actually, don't beat people into having kids and don't speak softly, okay? Just say it loud, say it proud. Babies rock, have them. We can give young people opportunities to learn and practice. Social learning is a key part of how people become able to have kids. There's the classic study where they gave fake babies to teenagers to prevent them from having babies, and then they actually had more babies, because it turns out when you practice having kids, you realize this is not actually quite as hard and miserable as the narratives say. This is manageable. In general, when you learn how to do it, it's better than you think. And of course, we can do it by transferring resources, time and money, to families. That can be politically, through taxes. It can also be in our own communities where we say, you know what, this young family wants to have kids. Somebody in this church has got an unused vacation cottage an hour outside of town where these people could live while they're looking for a house. And none of this depends on elections. Now, it might sound weird that I'm like, well, the most pronatal regime we've had in a long time, administration, just got elected. So now let's talk about not policy. No, it's because now that we actually are in a position to use power, we should be talking about the next step. Yes, let's get a bigger child tax credit. Let's get some cool EOs. Let's do all this stuff. And what is it for? It is the sharp end of the crowbar to wedge in. And once we get that stuff, when our friends say, well, but it's expensive, you say, look, the government is doing its part to help you with the expense. Let's do ours and make the people. Okay? This is a 2-part social change. The first part, yes, is policy. And I know a lot of us are skeptical of how effective policy is. Turns out pinning a medal on a lady doesn't work. I think all of us, the most optimistic people about policy, would still say policy alone is not going to get you a lot of babies. It is the point of the spear that the rest of us can use as leverage to say, look, this is where we're headed as a society. This is what we are doing together. Get on board or get left behind.